Thank you, Tay. Hello, everyone. So, jot one word to remind yourself about a positive team experience. Next, I would like you to recall a disastrous team experience. My intent is from today's talk, something usable will sink in that's going to help you not only in this class, but in everything else you do, educationally and professionally. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the idea of a team operations model. And the idea of a team operations model is that being on a team is a process. So any process has inputs, which is like your team. It has outputs, which is like the project your guys are going to be working on. Any process has constraints, which are boundaries on what you are and are not allowed to do, what you must do, what the topic of your project is, etc. And then finally, any process has things that support it, and those are team effectiveness factors. The first effectiveness factor is the two C's, the letter C as in commitment and the letter C as in competence. So are you committed to this team? Are you committed to this project that your team is going to work on? And if you look at the root of the word commit, it's like transmit. You're putting yourself with what's going on. You're sending yourself. You're putting your identity into this project that you're working on. Competence still uses com, which means with. Heat is the root of the word power. If you're competent in something, it means you have power to put into this thing that you've committed yourself to. And the reason the two C's go together is because look around you. Let's say the person to your right or left is on your team. And let's say they're really committed to having a good, effective project with you. The trouble is they don't have a clue what they're doing. They have no competence in the area. Well, they're kind of like multiplying factors. So if you take 100% times 0%, you get 0%. Or take the flip. They're competent. They're an ace in this field that your project's going to be about. But they have other things in their mind and they have other priorities and they're not sending themselves into this project. So you have 0 commitment and 100% competence. So the factor is 0. You need both. You need to have your commitment and competence be something greater than 0. And ideally, you need to have your teammates' commitment and competence be something greater than 0. But I'm going to say something that may or may not seem unobvious, and that is, as long as you have enough commitment and competence, your team project will get done with or without your teammates. It's just, it'll be capped. It won't be as big as it could have been. As long as you have those two C's, your project will get done. Okay, the next factor in effectiveness is team stages. Effective teams develop in stages. The first stage of any team is forming. In forming, you know who else is on your team. The minute you found out who's on your team, you exchange contact information. You get to know one another. What are your majors if you don't already know each other, etc., etc. What are you interested in? Why in the world are you taking a class in virtual reality? Any and all of the above. That's the forming stage. The storming stage is when you start competing, there's that word again, about different ideas for, how are we going to do this project? What approach are we going to take? What's our priority? And you'll have many different ideas, and you'll have to kind of pick one or two and go with them. But you may not agree at the beginning, and plus, who's the leader, or do we need a leader, and this, that, and thrashing around. This is inevitable. One of the key benefits is to learn how to be at ease in the storming phase of any team project. The third phase is called norming. You finally align on a goal and a plan, and each of you takes responsibility for what your part is going to be. You have ambition to work on it, and you kind of move forward and start operating in a consistent manner that you all can identify and be comfortable with. And out of that comes the fourth stage, which is perform. And the team is humming along, working smoothly, effectively, competently, and autonomously. A lot of you will be working on your own doing stuff and then coming back together to kind of tell each other what you found out. So that's the 4 stages. The next effectiveness factor is what I like to call the 4 practices. Effective teams follow effective practices, and the practices you use correlate to what stage you're in. When you're trying to pick a project to work on, or forget that, what day to meet between classes, you're going to be in a brainstorming mode. In a brainstorming mode, you're allowed to suggest anything and everything. I think we should work on a project to improve the response time of smartphones on the use for diet tracking. You're making it up. And somebody else says, that's a stupid idea, that'll never work. Nope, whoa, that's not brainstorming. That's duck shooting. In brainstorming, you toss an idea into the air, anything goes. Everybody's allowed to come up with lots and lots of ideas. The goal is to have lots and lots of options to look at, because when you first start, you have very limited options. And in brainstorming, you'll generate some things none of you ever thought of, because some aestheticant will say something, and then Eva will say, hey, that reminds me of such and such, and then Rebecca will say, yeah, and then just the other day I was walking in the... After brainstorming, which is a diverging process, comes deciding, which is a converging. Now that you've expanded the range of possible things you could work on, you focus down. You could do this by voting. You could do this by having a consensus. You could do it by any kind of method you want, as long as all of you are more or less agreeing, okay, this is how we're going to narrow them down. We're going to follow this process. We'll do whatever Hummush thinks we ought to do. That's a very valid process. Or we'll take votes and then we'll keep voting and knocking them out until only 2 are left, deciding. The next thing is briefing. But to brief is to tell somebody something kind of at the beginning of a stage. For example, every time you guys get together for a meeting, you want to brief each other. What have we got to accomplish today? Let's get our contact information exchanged, or let's agree by the end of this meeting on who's going to do the video and who's going to do the audio and who's going to post the results on the blog, or whatever it is. Debriefing is kind of the end of something. In a meeting, you might say, well, what did you like about how this meeting went? Okay, let's keep doing the meeting that way. This time of day worked great. Or this time of day was really hard for me to get here on time. Could we do it 30 minutes later? Yeah, so debriefing. Those, simple as they are, seem to be some of the most useful, simplest, best practices to have an effective team. The final effectiveness factor is roles. Effective teams share roles. And I always loved this result when I first heard about it. One of the studies that was done on business teams in business schools was, it turned out that you needed to have something like 9 different roles covered in a team. Even if there were only 2 people on a team, there were still 9 roles. 2 of the roles are associated with traditional leadership. One of them is kind of, the image was a lion tamer, okay guys, we only got 5 more classes and we have to have our project done, and I have to have a rehearsal done the day before, blah, 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 let's get cracking. The other kind of leadership role is the chairman of the board or chairperson of the board, a coordinator. Say, well, we're doing, but I feel like aestheticant hasn't been enough of a voice in helping suggest what we should do. So, what do you think about that, aestheticant? And then, okay, well, that's good. Now, Eva has been quiet. What do you think, Eva? And Robot's going, me, I want to tell you, no, just take your turn, Robot. Wait a minute. Okay, now go. So the coordinator makes sure everybody is participating. The coordinator is kind of keeping their eye on the whole big picture. But there's still 7 more roles. One of the roles is a specialist. This is, or a geek or whatever. Once you've decided on your project, the specialist has a lot of detailed technical knowledge about that area. Maybe they know how to make videos with Vegas Pro 16 Edit, with fade-ins and animated screen slides and this, that, and the other thing. Or someone else may know how to make musical scores and blend them into an animation, if that's what your project's about. Or someone may be an expert in writing scripts that strike the hearts of the listeners and carry your key messages across emotionally. It doesn't matter what the technical area is. If that's coming up in your project, the specialist is going to have some skills there. Investigator goes around and finds out what the other teams are doing, walk around Second Life and see what else is going on. The evaluator, this is like the sober eye that's looking at the final product. Have we got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed? And the finisher is making sure everything got done. Like when I mistyped high five to Dudley a little bit ago, my evaluator said you misspelled 5, and so I went back and carefully put an asterisk, which is the acknowledged way, according to the specialist teams, of correcting your text. You put an asterisk with the correctly spelled note. Everybody knows that. And then there's the team worker. The team worker is the midfielder in a soccer team. He's somewhere between the people trying to kick the ball into the goal, and he's somewhere between the people trying to keep the other team from kicking the ball in your goal, and the midfielder is going back and forth, covering things that may be being missed by others that are kind of over-focused. Wow. How could 3 people on a team cover on all those roles? It turns out, when the B schools did this study, that human beings are quite easily capable of covering 2 or 3 roles by natural bent. So it's a matter, in your case, of finding out early on, now that you know that there are these multiple roles. Oh, well, what are my roles? What am I good at? What are the areas that I'm already able to commit or competent in? So that's the team roles. To summarize this, I look at all these wonderful slides. They all look so great, productivity on the y-axis, factors on the x-axis. And what they imply is that collaboration is a technology with known methods that work. And that's true. But it's also true that collaboration is an art. And there's some blend between art and engineering. That word was craft. So think of this team building, not just for what you're doing for Is One Life Enough, but as I said, for everything you're going to do from now and into the future, as a craft that you are fully capable of learning more and more skills in. It's a set of learnable skills, communicable, learnative skills. And part of that is knowing what you can count on yourself for. Where are the areas I'm likely to commit myself, which is based on interest and core intent, and then your competence. And your competence can always grow. You can always add to your skills. So knowing what you can count on yourself for, but also knowing what you should not count on yourself for. No, I don't think I'll ever want to code in C. Nope, I'm sorry. I'm sure that if I spent hours and hours and days on it, I could learn to code in C or C++ or whatever those, but I have no interest in it. Therefore, if you need somebody to code in C, go find them. Similarly, knowing what you can count on your mate for and what you cannot count on them for makes life a whole lot easier when you get together. Instead of trying to persuade someone to do something they have no inclination or bent to do, you swap roles until they match. This matters to you as a team member, but it also matters to you if you're the team leader. But it also matters to you, if I may repeat myself, as a team member, because no matter what team you're on, no matter how disastrous it may seem, if you have some level of non-zero commitment and non-zero competence that you can bring to it, and you want to bring to it, that team will, if achingly, inch forward and accomplish something. So the point in learning this technology and art is simply to make it more pleasant on yourself and others, and to increase the level at which you can accomplish. Okay, you all have done great on this. What I want to do now is introduce a new model I've been working on. Here's the new model. That X shape that's at the bottom, a flat soccer field. It's a soccer field, and it has 2 lines on it, and they cross each other at right angles. And y'all are those little Egyptian figures, And they're all standing in the upper left quadrant called brainstorming. And the image in my mind is that you're in your little team, or in this case, you're in your Is One Life Enough Spring 2019 class, and you're wandering around like the lost tribes of Israel on this vast soccer field, desert of a soccer field. I'm mixing my metaphors, but you're wandering around with no grid lines, wondering, what do we do? How do we get started? How do we get from here to there? And not only that, where is here and where is there? And so you start in brainstorming mode. What do we do? Where do we want to go? What shall we do? Eventually, you have enough things to choose from. You say, aha, we're going to do such and such. So you march across the new grid line into the upper right quadrant called deciding. And now you start, instead of diverging, you converge onto, okay, this is, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and the way we're going to do it is, we think such and such, and maybe you can be the leader. One of the things that has to happen in storming, by the way, is figuring out who the leader is. There's some storming going on there in the deciding as well, okay? So that kind of happens, and then now you've got a new grid line at right angles to the first, and you march across it, and now you're into contending. And contending is the same flavor of tugging and pulling and pushing back and forth. Maybe you're pulling back and forth on each other because you're still storming as a team about who's going to do, or maybe you're competing with that team on the other side of the room. We're going to have the best video presentation in Is One Life Enough Spring 2019. No, we are, or whatever. But the flavor of it is you're strengthening your muscles. You're contending. You're putting effort in. You're building. You're creating. You're making new stuff happen. That's what's going on in contending. And in our stages model, that would be the norming and performing. Then, somewhere in there, you make your project presentation. Woohoo! We march across, again, the grid line into the fourth lower left quadrant called mirroring. The idea is, let's say, like some of you mentioned, you had a really good experience, or you were really pleased with how the project came out. That's something you like, and you want to do it like something like that again in the future. Or, let's say, one of the other teammates impressed you with how they did something, and you admired them. You see something that you like, and you want to be like it, and you model yourself on it. All of that is meant to be thrown into there under mirroring. I would call it debriefing. What did you like about how this went, and what did you wish? And whatever you liked is something you're going to tend to adopt and incorporate and carry forward. And whatever you wished is going to give you a different kind of practice that you're going to adopt and carry forward with you. So, that's cool. That's all good. I've got the little Is One Life Enough band of Egyptians wandering around the Gobi Desert of the soccer field of brainstorming, deciding, contending, and mirroring. But what is with that helix at the top called unfolding? This is the idea of growth that you guys brought up already. Every time you go through this kind of cycle, it's kind of like, it could be a clockwise progression around the field there: brainstorm, decide, contend, mirror. Every time you've completed one project and you start a new one, you're going a step up from where you were before. You're starting at a higher level with more skills, more clarity about your commitment. You kind of repeat the cycle, but on the second level of that helix. And then you go round again, and then you're at the next level. You go round again at the next level. The flavor of that, you're not just repeating it, you're expanding it. A word I can come up with where something repeats and expands, like an image. If you're looking down on the top of a time-lapse picture of a flower that's blossoming, it's unfolding itself. And then from within there, new petals poke up, spread out, and fold out. And it's an endless unfolding. Each of us have a finite lifetime, but we are part of a generation of peers, our age, younger and just older. There's an unfolding as a group of human beings where this progressive growth and competence and commitment and ability to take on unthinkable projects. unthinkable projects suddenly start to become thinkable and reachable. Where does that come from? If we have finite lifetimes, where's this all coming from? And that's supposed to be the little asterisk at the bottom right where it says generating. There's some generative capacity, I feel, of being human, from inside of which this expansion of ourselves occurs. So this is the partnership team building model